Salutations, everybody. It is Maddie here today, and welcome to episode 229 of the H.A.M Radio Podcast. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm sure you noticed already the overlay's a bit different this time around because it's just me for this episode. Actually, when Karak and I got into a call, he was like, man, I got such a bad migraine. So we agreed together that he could just take the week off, go relax, lay in bed, rest his head, rest his eyes, and I'll handle it this week. So hopefully you guys like when I just do a little solo hosting. We have a lot of Patron questions this week, so it'll be a very interactive episode. In fact, our first section has 6 questions that I can really go into detail on. So thank you guys so much for interacting with the show. As always, during the introduction, I like to let you guys know we're available on Apple Podcasts, we're available on Google Podcasts, you can listen to us on Spotify, Pocket Casts, we're obviously available on YouTube. So we have a number of ways for you to listen to us. And if that's also not your thing, and maybe you want to support us a little bit, you can flick us a buck. And if you do so, you get early access to the podcast. It comes out on Friday. As soon as this is done recording, I literally render it, upload it to Patreon, and boom, you can listen on your phone, or you could listen wherever you want on your computer. So you do get early access to the show. A couple more bucks gives you access to my brand new podcast series, BFGFAFK. It's hosted by myself and my girlfriend, Laylee. We've had some insanely positive reception to it. It's an open book show where we talk about various topics and hope that you guys can take something away from it. So it's a much shorter, more condensed podcast series. Episodes sit around about an hour each time, and we talk about real life stuff, and we try to get better as people. And it's honestly been the best thing I've done for myself as a creator in a while. It's just really nice to sit down with someone you love deeply and talk about really impactful stuff and share stories from the audience. So if you want to get involved on that level, that's available as well on the podcast apps I had listed, or you can get early access for that show through the Patreon. So thank you guys so much for supporting the Patreon. This month alone, we've had 27 brand new patrons, which is the most I've ever seen in a month. That's because I did launch my Patreon trailer announcing the studio, and I've really tried to up the quality on the channel, and without really losing that laid-back feel that I think it has that is really, really valuable. And so I'm just thrilled, honestly, at the overall reception from everything. And so thank you guys so much for joining on this journey. As for upcoming projects, the only big thing I'm working on is I need to do one more interview for the documentary I'm working on for Pandemic. I need to interview someone about Destroy All Humans, but all the other interviews are done, and I will start production on that as soon as possible. I think my goal is to get it out sometime in mid-December, probably before I go away. Not probably, it will be out before I go away for my holiday break. It'll probably be scheduled during that time because it's a really special video. Want to make sure I do it right. So, got to bring up, I'm using a Windows Movie Maker for this one because I wanted to put a webcam there. So YouTube sometimes like flags videos if it's just a picture and audio. They don't monetize it, or they don't really sometimes let it even go up. So that's happened to me a couple times. So I have to use that for timestamps. So you'll hear a little bit of clicking around in this episode. Just a heads up for our audio listeners. Anyway, we're going to start off this show with the Game Awards. We're going to go through a majority of the nominees. I'm not going to talk about like Content Creator of the Year or whatever. We're going to talk about mostly the gaming ones. There's, like I said, a lot of questions revolving around some of the picks from the jury, how the jury works. If you guys want more, I guess, individualized, focused thoughts from me, I'll be expanding upon them in this episode. But I did just upload a video on Friday about how the Game Awards may have a possible growing problem on their hands. I really focused on how having Smash Bros. Ultimate in the show makes sense in the terms of that's an amazing fighting game. It's one of the best fighting games I've ever played, and they're accomplishing something incredible, blending all these brands together. It's honestly, it will never happen again. So enjoy it while it's here because only Smash Bros. Can do something like this. For God's sakes, they even got Microsoft characters in there. Like, that's crazy. So it absolutely deserves to be in a Game of the Year conversation for the year it came out. And I think it's a little silly looking to have a 2018 game coming out in 2019 in the Game Awards, because in the category Smash Bros. Ultimate is in, it can walk away with a lot of hardware. So I thought that was a little bit silly. I talked a little bit about what was viewed as a conflict of interest between Kojima as well as Death Stranding, as well as Jeff Keighley. Their friendship is no secret to anybody. And seeing Death Stranding, which sits at an 83 on Metacritic in the Game of the Year talk, has, dissuaded some people from being interested in the show. There's also been some selections that have been a little more controversial. So let's get into it by answering our first question. I had like kind of a bad week, so I found it a little bit therapeutic since Karak wasn't joining us. I actually just like wrote down all the questions on a piece of paper. I always feel like my brain registers things better when I'm reading them on actual pieces of paper instead of reading them off a screen. Maybe it's just a weird thing with me. I learn better. I process things better with pen and paper. So with that all out of the way, question 1 comes from Aunt Jemima. Who exactly nominates games for the Game Awards? And is it unaffected by financial incentives? Also, what category do you want to see added? So for the first one, you can actually go to the Game Awards site and see pretty much 80 different outlets, or they say influencer outlets as well, that help select all the games for all these categories. Pretty much everyone submits their vote. They go in, and then what has the most votes for each category ends up in that said category. So a bunch of people voted for Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro, Smash Bros. Ultimate, and The Outer Worlds for Game of the Year contenders to have them put on this list. So that's how it's kind of accounted for. When it comes to financial incentives, it's really strange because, for example, I'm going to have to name names, but like you can look at some of the people on the jury. We see Kinda Funny, we see What's Good Games. Andrea Renee is a part of What's Good Games. She hosted the EA press conference. And I mean, Greg Miller just hosted the E3 thing for EA Play and helped reveal Jedi Fallen Order gameplay. So I don't want to say financial incentives involved. I will never accuse someone of that unless there's actually hard proof, but relationships are clearly there, and I can totally understand why people are like, but look, I mean, these people got to work, they got to make their money, and they're in a position to get a great opportunity like that. So don't say I'm not saying rather I begrudge them for that, but I think those relationships should be disclosed somewhere, or they should just not have outlets who have that level of a relationship with a company in on the jury to keep it as clean as possible, even if it doesn't impact their opinions whatsoever. So hopefully that answers your first question. As for what category I want to see added, I've always felt like the Game Awards did a solid job covering most categories. I would like to see like best JRPG of the year. I think there's a lot of niche JRPGs that really fly under the radar. And I know we have best RPG of the year on the Game Awards list, but I really think that JRPG should have its own category, especially because they're getting westernized a little bit more. They're becoming a lot more accessible. A lot more people are playing them. Gaming's growing through them. I don't think there's that stigma as much attached to them as previously there was. And so I think that would need its own category. And I checked and didn't see it. If I do see it as we go through the categories one by one, then I will correct myself. But yeah, there isn't a JRPG category as far as I'm aware. And I think that would be a good addition for the show. So as we start things off, let's get into the Game of the Year picks, which is, as I mentioned earlier, Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, Smash Bros. Ultimate, and The Outer Worlds. What would I pick from this list? Smash Ultimate or The Outer Worlds? The Outer Worlds is more of a pick with my heart kind of thing. I don't think out of everything on this list, it should win. Quite honestly, objectively speaking, I think a game like Sekiro, Smash Ultimate, or Resident Evil 2 is far better suited, for that award. I think Resident Evil 2 really has all the chops to be a Game of the Year winner. I would not be shocked at all if it walked away from it with the award, just because it's got the AAA level, it's got the fanfare, it's got the sales, it's got the reinvigoration of Capcom. There's a lot of good PR behind it. I don't really see anyone saying anything bad about it. It's a great game. They improved the story. It shows that remakes can become like the definitive version. Like no one's going to go back and play the old Resident Evil 2 unless they're feeling really nostalgic. They're going to play this one, which fixes pretty much everything that was wrong with the original. So I think that Resident Evil 2 overall does a job or a great job rather. I can't talk for these first 10 minutes. It's always getting warmed up in these podcasts. But anyway, I think Resident Evil 2 does a great job, and because of that, I think it shall win. Sekiro could be a good one, but I just think because of that whole accessibility talk, I think that really squashed any way of it winning. And I'd also love to see Resident Evil 2 win on a personal note, because it was a, January, February game, really early in the year. People always have this random argument that, it came out early in the year, it got forgotten about. It's like, dude, like how? People who are making these votes are so invested in this conversation. I don't know how people can just forget because it came out at the beginning of the year. We'll see if that conversation is still prevalent when we take a look at next year, where, oh my God, the first 3 months are going to be insane. Anyway, The Game of the Year nominations bring us to another question. I'm going to combine them both because Mike Fury asked a question about Control, as did Great Ape 51. I noticed a little Dragon Ball reference there. I like that. They're both about Control, so we'll start off with Mike Fury. Control is nominated on various categories, and some titles are snubbed. Give us your hot takes on why Control is being nominated in more categories than Slay the Spire, which, by the way, some folks may not know this, but it did come out in early access in 2017, but this year was its full release, Fire Emblem, and Disco Elysium. Meanwhile, Great Ape 51, you say, Game of the Year list and award shows are mainly silly bullshit entertainment, like all these sports programs that yell at each other for 30 minutes. Control received approximately 7 nominations total, which seems odd. It felt like a good, not great game with a hard-to-follow story and good RTX tracing support, if you have the GPU to support those features. It didn't seem to sell very well, and had hardly any buzz or zeitgeist among other games or gaming podcasts when it came out. It seems like games media is trying really hard to push or boost it up, too much in my opinion. Thoughts, disagree, or agree? So we'll start off with Mike Fury on why Control was nominated over pretty much a lot of other games that have sold really well, or better, rather. I think it's not hard to outsell Control at this point in time. Fire Emblem is another one. Fire Emblem is arguably the biggest snub, I think, next to Devil May Cry 5. I mean, those two, it's like, what? I mean, both those games reviewed very well, and I imagine most outlets played it, but maybe they didn't, and that's why it's not there. But anyway, I think Control's nominated just because it's a good game. You know, that's the thing. I think Great Ape has an opinion that I respect, but overall, a lot of the press outlets really liked it. I think the issue with Control is I would imagine 505 Games, the publisher, really dropped the ball with trying to push this game, because I'll say what I said in my video originally. The game came out in August. It did not chart in August. That's embarrassing on all fronts. That's embarrassing for advertising. That's embarrassing for publishing a game on a AAA level from an excellent developer like Remedy, and you really couldn't try to push the game. I personally, from the outside looking in, all the blame falls on the publisher for not putting the name out on this game, not doing more influencer events. I mean, I remember leading up to Control, myself, Karak, I heard it on a couple of other podcasts I listened to. People were really talking about how no one was talking about Control. You didn't see any buzz on social media, as Great Ape mentioned. There really wasn't anyone talking about it. With all that said, it doesn't really take away from the fact that the game is great for those who played it. I had it originally. I bought it on Amazon the week it came out. I got it on sale for $45, and then I used a gift card and it brought it down to $15, and it was sitting there in the seal, and eventually I was like, you know what? I'm really just not interested in playing this game. I think Remedy games are great. I like Alan Wake. I actually liked Quantum Break. But I'm just not in the mood for this. And oftentimes as a creator, I'll push myself into playing something sometimes when I don't really have to. And a lot of times it works out and it's great and I don't really need much convincing. But that was a case where I was like, I'm not going to review this. I'm not going to talk about it. It's not going to benefit the channel. I'm not interested in playing it on a personal level. So I sold it and got rid of it. So yeah, Control is a good game from everything I've read, an excellent game for many. In the terms of people not talking about it, it's funny because Great Ape, I think the only podcast I've ever heard that has talked about Control extensively with a spoiler cast, as well as mentioning it many times throughout the show, is actually Sacred Symbols with Colin Moriarty and Chris Ragon. They've talked about Control a decent amount, giving it its fair amount of attention. With that, we scroll down to Action Game of the Year. For the best game in the action genre focused primarily on combat, we have Apex Legends, Astral Chain, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Devil May Cry 5, Gears 5, and Metro Exodus. So, best game in the action genre focused mainly on combat. I don't really know how Metro Exodus slid in there. That's more of like a stealth, slow down, anxious type of combat system, in my opinion. I don't know if that would really fit in the action category unless you're just sprinting around trying to kill everybody on a lower difficulty. So I think a lot of people would probably give it the Devil May Cry 5, and I wouldn't be upset with that. Apex Legends is a sleeper pick. I really, really like that game a lot. I was actually just playing it last night with some friends on the new map, and I'm not as good as I used to be at that game because I took a good number of months off, but it's still excellent, still fun to play, still smooth as butter. But my pick for this list would absolutely be Astral Chain. I love that game. Honestly, I go back and forth between that being my game of the year and The Outer Worlds being my game of the year, because Astral Chain came out in August and I still go back to it for a couple missions. It's not like I sit down there for hours at a time. I think I only have about 25 to 30 hours. I think I'm at like the 27 hour mark to be exact. So it's not like I'm pumping tons of hours into it, but I keep coming back to it because it's fun to engage with. It's such a great combat system. I would love it if this game won, because Platinum Games is on their game from top to bottom. Their storytelling has improved. We saw that thanks to Yoko Taro's help in Nier Automata. And we saw the influence of that carry over into Astral Chain, where they really created an excellent universe, a good story, but the combat system in that game was so good. It was actually a challenge, which is also great because for all I love about Nier Automata, one of my favorite games of all time, it really wasn't challenging. So I love to see this game on this list. I would hope it would win, but I think Devil May Cry 5 will walk away from it. A lot of people always go Call of Duty because it's popular. God, I hope not. I really hope not. I know a lot of people like Modern Warfare, but no. Action game, come on. All right, let's move on to the next category, which is Action Adventure Game. For the best Action Adventure Game combining combat with traversal and puzzle solving, we have Borderlands 3, Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. So, out of everything on this list, I've played Borderlands 3, I've played Resident Evil 2, I've played Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and I played about 4 or 5 hours of Sekiro. I think, based off the description, which is combining combat with traversal and puzzle solving, when it comes to traversal and puzzle solving, Death Stranding really seems to fit the bill, because it has... It's a game about traversing, right? And like laying down zip lines and roads and connecting each other and creating vehicles and whatnot, from what I've watched of the game. So the thing it's lacking is combat, which apparently is not really created as much in the vein of Metal Gear. Borderlands, I don't know how that could really get into the traversal and puzzle solving. It's a lot of what Borderlands 2 did, which is running around. There are the occasional puzzles, but they're so stupidly simple. Like one involved throwing grenade types at statues. It's like, okay, wow. So quite honestly, I would hand it up to either Resident Evil 2 or Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I think Link's Awakening's great. I really enjoyed that game. It's cute, but I think sometimes it's a little vague because of its old school nature, where I think Resident Evil 2, I don't think it gives you hints, but it allows you to think on a deeper level in a way that doesn't leave you feeling stuck. And I think that's really important with puzzle solving. The combat in this game is great because it's got intensity in the terms of item resource management, and traversal's tense as well because of Mr. X. So I think Resident Evil 2 once again has all the chops. I would not be shocked if that game walked away with a couple of awards. Sekiro, you could put in there. Combat's excellent in that game. It has new levels of verticality, sorry. So you could put Sekiro in there. I'm not sure about the puzzle solving aspect. I can't speak to that as much. But I think when it comes to hitting all three of what's mentioned in this subtitle, definitely Resident Evil 2 or Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Death Stranding would be a sure shot, in my opinion, because it does something kind of refreshing for people with the traversal, with the puzzle solving, but it doesn't really have combat. So Resident Evil 2, in my opinion. All right, next we've got art direction presented by Samsung QLED. Oh boy, love promotions. For outstanding creative and or technical achievement in artistic design and animation, once again, we have Control. So just as Grade 851 said, yeah, a lot of Control going on here. We have Death Stranding, Grease, Sayonara, Wild Hearts, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening. Technical achievement or outstanding creative, artistic design and animation. I'm really confused. Death Stranding, I can understand why it's there. I was about to say I'm confused, but I know a lot of people have said it's just very pretty. Just looking at some of the art, Sayonara, Wild Hearts looks really neat. So does Grease. Grease? Not sure. Grease looks cool, though. Grease looks really cool. Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, couldn't really fall in love with that art style. So I'd give it to one of the indies, Gris or Sayonara Wild Hearts. I really like those. Those are pretty good in my opinion. Let's go back to the Game Award or Game of the Year selection, because we do have a question from Kylan521. He asks, do you think that The Outer Worlds will win any of the awards it has been nominated for, which are Best Narrative, which I believe is Next Note Next's audio design. There's also Best Performance, where Parvati and Ashley Birch are nominated, and then Best RPG as well as Game of the Year. I think that The Outer Worlds will walk away, Kyle, with Best RPG. I don't think it's going to take Game of the Year. I would be shocked if it did. I don't think its narrative was... It was a good story, but I don't think it was like, whoa, wow, enough to really win Best Narrative. And performance, I could actually see the Parvati performance winning, because I love that character so much. And I know I'm not alone on that. A lot of people love Parvati, but like, fortunately, I was saying all this stuff, before the game came out to everyone in the public, and the public formed their opinion, and it started getting propagated on social media. I was able to say in my review multiple days before launch, like, hey, Parvati's amazing. So I'm just happy that a lot of the public shares that opinion, and I wouldn't be surprised if they won that category as well. All right, let's get into audio design. Recognizing the best in-game audio and sound design, we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Control again. Oh my God, Death Stranding again. See, this is what I'm saying, man. Death Stranding, it's in a lot of categories. I can understand why people view it as a conflict of interest. Gears 5, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice again as well. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to pick Call of Duty for this one. When I played the game, my gosh, man, it sounds great. I mean, these guns have like a really good kick to them. I like it. Sekiro would be another good one. I think the clanging of the swords, there's a great audio-based feedback, and that really gives you a little bit of an adrenaline pump. And I think that's where good sound design really thrives, and is in pushing like the gameplay, the believability of the universe forward, which I think both those games really do well. All right, community support. Recognizing a game for outstanding community support, transparency, and responsiveness. We have Apex Legends, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite. We have Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, and that's it. Okay. Apex Legends fell off a lot, so it's still popular, right? Like, that's the thing. I hated how people were like, Apex Legends is dying. No, oh my God, no. Just because it's not Fortnite and it's not exploding with insane success does not mean it's failing. That game is a cash cow for EA and Respawn. Yeah, they're doing just fine, but I think that game fell off in the terms of all of its widespread support pretty quickly. If I were to really pick one on this list, I would hope that Final Fantasy 14 would win, because that game really is a true bounce back story. I've heard great things about Destiny 2 now that it's free to play, and it's made me really want to try it out, which I never thought I'd ever say. But it's the type of game that if I weren't always going from game to game to game, I would want to get invested in, like with any MMO style game. And that just does not seem like the commitment I want to make, especially because so many people are so far ahead. Rainbow Six Siege is another bounce back story. That's an excellent game. I don't like it as much as when I played it at launch, even though I think for a lot of people it's a better game now. Okay, Content Creator of the Year, who gives a shit? Esports Coach, I don't care. Esports Event, I don't care. Give it to Evo, why not? Esports Game of the Year, can't really comment on that because I don't pay attention to competitive Counter-Strike, Dota 2, Fortnite, League of Legends, or Overwatch, but because I like me some MOBAs, will give it to League of Legends. Esports Host, Esports Player, Esports Team, Family Game. Here, we can talk about this one a little bit. For the best game appropriate for family play, irrespective of genre or platform, we have Luigi's Mansion 3, Ring Fit Adventure, really underrated game, by the way, Super Mario Maker 2, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Yoshi's Crafted World, all Nintendo products. Pretty wild, man. Pretty wild. And all these games sold stupidly well too. I'm gonna say Mario Maker or Smash Ultimate. I don't view Ring Fit Adventure, like my girlfriend and I have this game, and I don't really view it as a family game by any stretch. It's in fact something I'd rather play separately so I can focus on working out. Luigi's Mansion 3 is good co-op, but it's got an online element. So does Mario Maker. But I don't know. I don't view that as like a gather around the TV. Where Smash Bros. Ultimate, that's all I think about is like my friends and I huddled around the TV playing. Since the very inception of Smash Brothers, I've been gathering around TVs to play that game. I think that one fits it perfectly, and I would be shocked if anything else on the list actually won. Best fighting game of the year. For the best game designed primarily around head-to-head combat, Dead or Alive 6, I'm not going to mention the second option because it's a sack of shit, Mortal Kombat 11, Samurai Showdown, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I would not mind if Dead or Alive 6 won. For all its story is horrible, and it is such a deep, complex fighter that's accessible on levels, but it's so fun when you get into the nitty-gritty. And I played this game when it first came out, and I loved it. I love it as a fighter. It is a very fun fighter. It's how I felt about Tekken 7. Like, Tekken 7, I beat the story. I got the Platinum Trophy for it, but I kept coming back because it was such a good fighter. It's very fine-tuned. There's a lot of little mechanics tucked into it. And Dead or Alive 6 has some of the best sound effects in a fighting game ever. I wouldn't be surprised if Mortal Kombat 11 won. I will say, out of a lot of recent NetherRealm launches, this is probably one of my favorite ones. I really thought they did a good job with balancing the characters, at least from what I played, and I enjoyed my time quite a bit on Mortal Kombat 11. Samurai Showdown, I did not play. That one looks really cool, though. Smash Bros. Ultimate, once again, could easily walk away with it, though, because that game's just so good. It's such a great fighter. Fresh indie game, recognizing a new independent studio that released its first game in 2019. Congrats to all these developers, by the way. This is great. So we have, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this. It's ZA/UM for Disco Elysium. This is a huge RPG that's really taken a lot of people's attention, which I'm glad it's on this list, because it kind of quietly came out at the end of this year, and it was also around the same time, I think, before The Outer Worlds. And so I was a little bit nervous for it because I remember someone sent it to me in August and I looked at the gameplay and it looks awesome. I do want to play it, but it's such a commitment. It's like a 90-hour game or something, Karak said, and it's just a lot of reading. And at least even, for example, for all the reading Divinity Original Sin 2 has, it's got some combat to spread it out a little bit. You know, I like reading in games a lot. If you watched my my playthrough of just Creation Club content for Fallout 4, I love reading in games, but it's got to be broken up a little bit. Nomada Studio for Gris. I once again got to apologize if I'm saying that game name wrong. Dead Toast Entertainment, sorry, for My Friend Pedro. That game looks awesome. Outer Wilds, Mobius Digital. A lot of people love that game. It's just funny because it's, you know, just unfortunate names, right? Outer Worlds, Outer Wilds. Mega Crit for Slay the Spire. This one's actually on my Christmas list. I'm hoping I get it. It was like $20 at GameStop, so I was like, yeah, let's throw this up. Let's see if Mama Bear wants to get it for me. It looks really cool, though. I love card games. If you guys ever pay attention to the background of actually any of my videos, you'll see I got boxes behind me of Dragon Ball Super cards. I have the draft box over here. I got pre-release kits here. I got decks in progress to my right. I have a lot of Dragon Ball card stuff. I need to get some water. I've been talking a ton. So yeah, pretty much I love card games, and having a roguelike or roguelite, I don't know which one it was actually, card game is right up my alley personally. So I'm all for that game. And then Untitled Goose Game from House. Really, really surprisingly successful game. I think it shot up to #1 on the Nintendo charts. I'd love to see Disco Elysium win this, but like all these games are so lovable. All these games look so great. Like, you can't hate any selection from this list, I think. They all look so cool. Game Direction, awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. We have Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro, The Outer Wilds. So literally the same Game of the Year list lineup, and then The Outer Wilds. Now, I have not played The Outer Wilds. I feel like Death Stranding is going to win this because it says innovation, and everyone's claiming that Death Stranding has really changed it up. And they're like, they made walking fun, which I find a little bit hilarious. I really don't think that's possible. You can make it somewhat engaging, but it's definitely not going to be fun, right? At least that's what I think. So my pick on this list would probably be Death Stranding to win it. All right, Games for Impact. For a thought-provoking game with a pro-social meaning or message. Concrete Genie, which I believe is centered a little bit around bullying and isolationism. Gris, I'm not sure what that's about. Kind Words, I actually have not heard of this one. Life is Strange 2. That game I have not played, but I've heard really good things. And Sea of Solitude, I've not played. So for education's sake, I will just say Concrete Genie, because I do at least know something about that. But I value any game that tries to pack in some real thought-provoking meeting, a social meeting rather, in their title. That's not jammed down your throat, but just something you can recognize and appreciate a new perspective on. I think one of the best games that did it was Gone Home. That was one of the first ones I ever played that was like that. Probably the first one I ever played that was like that. But anyway, next is the independent game for outstanding creative and technical achievement in a game made outside the traditional publisher system. Gosh, speaking, tough. Baba Is You by Hemply. Disco Elysium once more, Katana Zero, Outer Wilds, Untitled Goose Game. I have not played any indies this year when I really look at it. Last year I played a couple, but this year I did not see really any indies on my radar. I think the only one I played, if you will consider it an indie game, although I think Nintendo had some involvement in it, was Cadence of Hyrule. And that's not on this list. And I didn't even like that game that much, to be honest with you. Just kind of frustrating with the rhythm and navigation, and sometimes it didn't balance out well and you'd get killed for unfortunate reasons. But we'll go with Disco Elysium. Mobile game, I don't care. Keep scrolling. Multiplayer game, Apex Legends, Borderlands 3, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Tetris 99, wow, and Tom Clancy's The Division 2. I really like The Division 2. I'm going to go with Apex Legends, though. I really think the way that characters played, I think the way that guns played, there was the 3-player team, there was a lot of squad interaction. That game, out of anything listed here, got me interacting with my team on a different level. And Borderlands 3 is more just like shoot and loot with a friend and talk about dumb shit on the microphone, where Apex Legends actually has you, like, you have to call stuff out. Or you can use the pinging system. I think Apex Legends actually introduced a lot of innovative stuff, so I hope that takes it away. Narrative. For outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game, we have A Plague Tale: Innocence, we have Control, Death Stranding, Disco Elysium, and The Outer Worlds. Wow, okay, so I liked A Plague Tale. It was a great game. See, the reason, I think what happened, why I didn't play a lot of indie games is because a lot of AA games this year caught my attention, which sort of sit in the realm of indie in a sense. They're not independent from a publisher by any stretch of the imagination, but they have a little more creative freedom, and we're seeing the budget in AA's go up and starting to push boundaries forward. Another popular AA game that I think a lot of people on the channel will know is actually, funny enough, from the same publisher, Greedfall. I know a lot of you guys on the channel love Greedfall. But anyway, narrative here, I would definitely, actually, out of everything that's here, since I haven't played Control or Death Stranding, can't really talk on them, but Plague Tale: Innocence or The Outer Worlds. In the terms of something being really compelling, I think A Plague Tale: Innocence really has those chops. But I think narrative and storytelling and writing, The Outer Worlds thrives and shines, man. I mean, there's choice and consequence, so there's a lot of cool ways to approach the story. I would be happy if that won. I think it's actually, now that I look at these selections, but then again, I have heard that Death Stranding story is really good. And I think that's the main reason why a lot of people play it. Anyway, oh, look at that. Look at that. The dogs are still barking even in a solo show. Every time, man. Ongoing game, we have Apex Legends, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Obviously, we're going to go with Fortnite. That's just the most logical pick. I'm not going to try to trick myself and say it's going to be something else. I obviously, if I was picking one I liked, it would be something else, but Fortnite will win that. Fortnite just updates unlike anyone else. All right, best performance awarded to an individual for voice acting, motion, and or performance capture. We have Ashley Birch as Parvati Holcomb. We have Courtney Hope as Jesse Faden in Control. We have Laura Bailey as Kate Diaz in Gears 5. We have Mads Mikkelsen as Cliff in Death Stranding. We have Matthew Peretta as Dr. Casper Darling in Control. And we have Norman Reedus as Sam Porter Bridges in Death Stranding. Wow, this is a great list. Great performances across the board. Probably going to be another Death Stranding winner here, but I'll go with Ashley Birch because I really, really liked Parvati. She nailed that kind of awkward, funny aspect that I think takes a really special talent to do. All right, our favorite category, role-playing game of the year. For the best game designed with rich player character customization and progression, including massively multiplayer experiences, there's Disco Elysium, Final Fantasy XIV, Kingdom Hearts 3, Monster Hunter World Iceborne, and The Outer Worlds. I'm going to go with The Outer Worlds. I think if you're looking at a role-playing game, Disco Elysium does a great job, but I think The Outer Worlds balances it out with more gameplay options, and therefore that is my selection. I think it's a no-brainer. Kingdom Hearts, no. Monster Hunter World Iceborne, the way you build weapons and armor, I guess you could argue that's a good progression system, but I just think The Outer Worlds is like what we think of when we see RPGs, and Disco Elysium represents a old school version rather of that. Score and music. Oh, speaking of which, we have Cadence of Hyrule here. We also have Death Stranding, Devil May Cry 5, Kingdom Hearts 3, Sayonara Wild Hearts. I'm between Kingdom Hearts 3 and Devil May Cry here. I'm probably going to go with Devil May Cry 5, though. Devil May Cry 5 has a banging soundtrack. Sports/racing game of the year. You would have thought I cared about sports games. I just like watching them. Strategy game of the year, we have Age of Wonders Planetfall, Anno 1800 from Ubisoft. Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Total War 3 Kingdoms, Tropico 6, and Wargroove. Wargroove is one I really wanted to play. I'll go with Fire Emblem 3 Houses, though. That one looks great. Okay, let's stop for a second and go over a question, or rather a statement, I should say. I always automatically say question, but it's actually a statement. We have Snork the Defeated, who states the following. I doubt most people watch the Game Awards for awards. I'm willing to bet most people are only really watching for the game trailers/announcements. After the awards, people are talking about what cool new game they saw. I originally didn't like the nominees at all. However, after thinking it over, I just don't give a shit about what wins. Death Stranding could win it. Death Stranding could win every award, and I couldn't give less of a crap because that's not why I watch the show. I don't really think it matters if the Game Awards stay in December. All right, Snark, I'm going to be honest. I disagree with you on some fronts. I think that you have, I get your mindset. I think a lot of people do care about the announcements, and I think that's a draw to it for sure. But it's also the show's displayed as like a celebration of gaming. So I think those announcements are inherently a part of celebrating gaming. The excitement of gaming, yes, this game won this category, the inclusion of the audience and their selection maybe winning. I think there's a lot more there. And if you get invested in your votes, that I think there's another reason to watch. And I do see a lot of people on my timeline personally always talking about what won, what didn't win, their thoughts on snubs maybe. And there's always that talk from award shows rather. So personally, I disagree with that, but I get where you're coming from because there are definitely a lot of people who are just like, dude, are you announcing this new Nintendo game? Or like what crazy things are going to happen at the Game Awards? Because for what it's worth, even if you think the show is stupid, they have really good announcements there every year for the last couple of years at least. So with that pause out of the way, let's get into VR/AR game of the year. For the best experienced playable in virtual or augmented reality, irrespective of platform, we have Asgard's Wrath, Blood and Truth, which is a PSVR game, Beat Saber, No Man's Sky, Trover Saves the Universe. Asgard's Wrath absolutely should win. Absolutely. No questions asked. That everyone's talking about, and we'll get into it in the next category, or I think 2 categories from now. Everyone's talking about Half-Life Alyx, which looks excellent. And if you care about that game and how great it looks, you should really, really, really consider looking at Asgard's Wrath, especially people who watch my channel. It is 110% an RPG, kind of made in the vein of Skyrim, that is for VR and looks excellent. Highly, highly recommended. Okay, so our first section is almost over. We have one last question coming from Destroy the Grave, aka Adam. What do you think of Spawnwave's idea for a YouTuber Game Awards show? So Spawnwave tweeted this out, by the way. I know Karak is game for it, but what would be the categories and how would it run without money and resources being a factor for conversation's sake? So I love these questions because it kind of ties us all together as a community. I love the idea. It's just going to be like, how do you separate who counts in a council of Game Award voting, right, on YouTube? Because let's say, for example, you look at Rad Brad. huge channel, but does Let's Plays, but has a lot of sway. I'm not saying he lacks a critical element by any stretch. I'm just saying, how do you factor him in versus someone, I guess we'll say someone like myself, who does do reviews consistently and has done them for 6 years now. Obviously, someone like Karak would be on that board. Obviously, someone like Angry Joe would be there. They're skill up. There would be people who are like, I do reviews pretty consistently. And I've always been of the opinion and discussion pieces and reviews. I don't know if I would ever fit in there. I don't think I have a large enough pull in the scheme of things. And I don't think people associate myself with just reviews. Especially this last half of the year, I wouldn't blame anyone, man, because I didn't get my hands on a single review copy for any request I put out there except for The Outer Worlds. So yeah, it has been tough out there. But yeah, obviously I don't think I sit in that league of definitive reviewers. So I'm not sure how the selection process would go with that. Do you pick people with like big channels? Do you pick people with sway? Do you pick people because of their ability to critique? That would be an interesting conversation to have. And when I saw it, I thought about like messaging him and saying, we should try to get this going. Like, this would be awesome to do. But obviously, as Adam asked, production-wise, resource-wise, how do you do that? And that in its own right is very, very interesting, because like, do you make it a big production thing, or do you do a YouTube stream and sort of, do you get dressed up for that YouTube stream? Obviously, you're not going to host it at a huge venue. I would imagine not. I think a live stream in like a production studio would make the most sense. Maybe a pre-recorded thing that does end up streaming live. At least that's how I do it first time around. And if it grows into something, you do it as a live show. That'd be interesting. Yeah, it's tough to say, but it's something I would like to look into. Obviously, money is a thing. And I think a lot of YouTubers and streamers would have to pool in cash together, because Jeff Keighley definitely has a lot more money than most of us out there. So yeah, I think personally that would be an interesting conversation to have. As for categories, I think we would probably get a little more niche with stuff like obviously best JRPG, maybe go by publisher, or I'm sorry, by company, best Microsoft game, best PlayStation game, best Nintendo game, that type of stuff. I think while that may be viewed as a little divisive in the perspective of the Game Awards, I think for our show could be a little bit different in that regard. And then obviously you'd have a Game of the Year selection, and we could have fun ones too, right? Like I don't want to dunk anyone, but it could be like worst character or most unlikable character. That'd be interesting too. I think the selections would separate it to kind of twist things on its head. But anyway, that concludes the discussion about the Game Awards, some of my selections I'd personally make. Let's get into topic number 2 as I flip this paper over and talk about the Resident Evil 3 remake that had just leaked. So, speaking of Spawnwave, funny enough, that's why I saved his question, or a question involving him, for last. He had reported that a Resident Evil 3 remake was in development and on track for a 2020 launch, and then Eurogamer.net, who I will have an article up reading from them, had God almighty, what is speaking this episode? I am so fried right now. Eurogamer has heard of the project also. Sources close to its development suggest it has been in development for some time, although the franchise's upcoming multiplayer portion, Project Resistance, is currently being given the spotlight. Development on the game has been hinted at more or less by Capcom itself in the past. The developer suggested more of a remake of its classic back catalog would follow if Resident Evil 2 sold well, which it absolutely did. Oh, by the way, when I said fried, I didn't mean like I'm on drugs or anything. I just realized like what that actually sounded like. Anyway, Resident Evil 3 remake in development. It's really interesting because when did Capcom suggest they'd make more remakes? I'm looking at this. Okay, this is a PDF at the beginning of this year from Capcom stating if it did well. How quick does a remake happen then for Resident Evil 3? I've never played Resident Evil 3, so I don't know how much carryover from 2 there could be in the terms of like assets. That's interesting though. So yeah, as I mentioned, Resident Evil 3 was not a game I had played much of, or at all rather. I got into Resident Evil super, super late. Like I haven't even played 4 yet. I played Resident Evil 5. That was my first one. I got my 360, and my friend was like, hey, there's this really good co-op game. You want to pick it up? And I didn't. I love Resident Evil 5. 6 was not good. 7 was really fun. 2 Remake was excellent. That's probably my favorite Resident Evil game, because playing as Claire was so intense. Like her playthrough was like, I beat Leon's and I'm like, that wasn't that bad. Why is everyone calling this game like kind of creepy? And then I played Claire's and I'm like, oh my god, Mr. X is just like, something happens, man. It's because he's there the whole time, so you just feel weak inherently from the start. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more from Capcom in terms of Remake. I know that a lot of people want to see like Dino Crisis. That's one Capcom project I've seen tossed around quite a bit. But for me, I'd love to see them bring back like Lost Planet in a collection. That would be awesome. That'd be so awesome. But anyway, great news from Capcom. It seems like they're really on the bounce back here. And now that we have Spawnwave mentioning it, and then we have a confirmed source in Eurogamer, who I actually did this. We covered their sources a lot when it came to Fable 4, and that has yet to prove true, although I think it's a no-brainer that it exists. I can't wait for Fable 4, by the way. But Eurogamer has been accurate in the past. Having additional confirmation from sources definitely helps with the argument that this is happening. But on track for a 2020 launch, that's what surprises me the most, because they're saying if Resident Evil 2 was successful, okay, we'll make another remake of Resident Evil 3. And it's like, okay, so we knew sales by, we'll say, February. Did you start development right away on a 3 remake? And in a year and a half, let's say it releases in the fall of 2020, you'll have another remake ready? That's crazy to think about, man. But I mean, they got a lot of money now, and I'm sure they got a lot of developers working on it. So certainly it's possible. I mean, for God's sakes, Ubisoft annualized humongous detailed open worlds with Assassin's Creed. So I think everything's possible at this point in our industry. It's just a matter of how much money you have. Anyway, I don't want to babble on this one too much, just because I can't say I'm necessarily educated on it. So we'll move into Half-Life Alyx. This one was a really, really sweet surprise reveal that happened this week. Valve tweeted out of nowhere that they were revealing a brand new chapter in the Half-Life franchise. And once it came out, there was a full trailer. We saw gameplay. Valve, word for word, said on Twitter, we're thrilled to announce Half-Life Alyx, a new full-length entry, so they knew what people were thinking, in the Half-Life series, built by Valve for VR. Return to Half-Life in March 2020, another March game. Oh my god. Pre-purchase now on Steam. This is the first time Valve in a really long while has made like a single-player game. And especially they've activated a dormant franchise after I think it was like 10, 12 years, 15 years, somewhere in that range of 10 to 15. So it was just shocking in general. And a lot of people have been like, why VR? Why? Jeff Keighley actually, he does this series called Final Hours. And it's kind of like a development documentary series. It's actually something I've always dreamed of doing. Like, he had like the inside knowledge about the game for a while. He's already played Half-Life Alyx to completion, which is just, think about that, man. This game doesn't come out till March, and this guy's already played it, beat it. He said it was about 15 hours, by the way, for conversation's sake. But anyways, he runs this series where he gets to kind of track development, and he sat down the day that this was announced and had a conversation with some of the devs about how, Valve disappeared for a while. Where were they? Why Half-Life? Why now? And generally speaking, what they had said was they wanted to find a way to make a big VR game and push that platform because they had the resources, they had the means to do so. They're Valve. And I think that's a smart usage of your assets, right? In this, now that we're hearing it from the word of mouth, it makes a little bit more sense, because we could have made that assumption very easily, like, hey, they're probably building something big. Apparently, also, they had a couple of canceled projects. I don't think they really detailed them. A little water break. And actually, their original plan was to either do Half-Life in VR or Portal in VR, but they said Portal would have caused a lot of motion sickness because you're getting thrown through a ton of portals, and it would just make the player horribly sick. And I think that was a smart choice. But they just wanted to originally make a big VR game. And then they went back to Half-Life and looked at it and said, let's do this. So let's go over some details about Half-Life Alyx. It's developed by Valve, built for VR. That means it's a PC, Steam, VR exclusive experience. This information comes from GameSpot. They have a kind of Half-Life Alyx details page. The release date is, as I mentioned, the window of March 2020, according to its Steam page. The Steam page is currently running a 10% off the pre-purchase promotion that ends March 30th, which would suggest it's coming out March 30th or March 31st. This is just speculation. There is an announcement trailer which has footage already. Now here's where I think a lot of people are going to have questions about platforms, which headsets are compatible. Half-Life Alyx is coming to PC and will work with all Steam VR compatible headsets according to its official website, which includes the Valve Index, the HTC Vive, Windows Mixed Reality, Oculus Rift, and Oculus Quest with PC and link cable. If you already own or buy a Valve Index before the end of 2019, you'll get a special bonus content, get access rather to special bonus content, which you can find more info about later in the article. It is required that you have VR. You can't just play this with a controller or a mouse and keyboard. How do you play Half-Life Alyx? What are the controls? It seems Valve is trying to make the experience as accessible to players, especially VR newcomers, as possible too. You'll be able to play Half-Life Alyx in room scale, sitting or standing, and movement controls include teleport, which lets you fade out and back in from point A to point B. So this prevents a lot of motion sickness for those who don't know. Instead of walking around, you can just teleport. Shift, which lets you smoothly move between 2 points, and continuous, which lets you use the analog stick to freely walk or run around, which I think would be optimal and more seamless for most of us. Half-Life Alyx also features 2 controller styles, finger tracking and trigger-based. The finger tracking style is unique to some VR controllers, like Valve Index controllers. Keyboard and mouse controls are not supported, as I mentioned earlier. So let's get into the free bonus content. If you were to pre-order the game and you already have a Valve Index, you'll get Half-Life Alyx gun skins and more. Half-Life Alyx comes with free bonus content, including environments from the game in your Steam VR home space, alternate gun skins for Half-Life Alyx, and Half-Life Alyx themed content, probably more gun skins, but that's just our speculation, for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. To get the free bonus content, you need to have already owned or buy a Valve Index VR headset by the end of 2019. So there is the price discount once more. The story. When does Half-Life Alyx take place? According to Valve, Half-Life Alyx is a full-length Half-Life game set between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2, and you play as Alyx Vance. This comes directly from their Twitter account, actually. It's set between the events of Half-Life 1 and 2. Alyx Vance and her father, Eli, discover a secret that leads them into the heart of the Combine's occupation of City 17. As Alyx give humanity its last chance for survival. So, that is pretty much the roundup of information on Half-Life Alyx for those who are not tuned in on it. We have 3 questions about it. So once again, huge thanks to the patrons for getting really involved this episode. You guys are carrying it here. We'll start off with Sky Guy after a quick water drink. Water break? Water drink? I feel like break's a little extensive, right? So we're going to stick with water drink. My voice is getting to that point in the podcast where my throat definitely feels strained because I've talked for now 52 minutes going on 53 straight. Kudos to those of you who could tolerate my voice for that long. Sky Guy, he asks, what are your thoughts on Half-Life's VR game? Do you think this game could be a tease for possibly something more? So I shared earlier in the show, I'll say it again, this game looks amazing. Looks incredible. Between this and Asgard's Wrath, it is a good time to look at VR. Do I think this could be a possible tease for something more? Part of me wants to say yes, it makes sense, but Valve has so much money, they don't have to, and they're doing this probably because they feel like they could push the VR space forward and be a definitive VR developer. And does that mean Half-Life 3 eventually comes to VR? I don't know. I feel like Half-Life 3, there was a plot point that leaked from the person who was writing, I think it was Half-Life 2 Episode 3, and maybe they go that route. See how viable Half-Life is in general. I think it's cool that the series is back. I say we just be happy that we have something Half-Life related. I'm not like a diehard Half-Life fan. I only played the first one. I bought the orange box on the Xbox 360, so I'm trying to remember. I think I've only played the first one. I have not played much of the second one, although I do know the whole story at the end that leads to Half-Life 3, and that being like a big question mark in our industry. So it could be a tease for something more, but I think they're obviously using this franchise because they felt it fit their big VR game vision, and maybe Half-Life 3 follows up afterwards. Certainly, Valve has had their share of successes and failures. I don't think if this fails, it'll deter them from doing a Half-Life 3. Question 2 comes from Grimblade, who's paying close attention, by the way, because he asks, will Half-Life Alyx finally be the game that convinces you to get VR? So he actually tagged me in this question, so if Karak were here, this one was actually directly for me. Also, general thoughts on Valve making single-player games again. Yeah, so between this and Asgard's Wrath, I tried to hold back on Asgard's Wrath. I forgot it was in one of the categories for the Game Awards. But yeah, in answer to your question, Grim, I was already looking at it because of that game. And this one, combined with that one, sort of seemed like system sellers because there's been a lot of like mini games we've seen for VR, if you will, not like full entry experiences like those two games. Like Asgard's Wrath is like a 30 to 40 hour RPG, and it reviewed really well, and it looks so fun. I really can't wait to play that. I really want to play that. So, yeah, I'd say that game kind of convinced me about VR. I was like, okay, this is the potential. This is a worthwhile experience. This is something new. And then Half-Life Alyx kind of was the icing on the cake. And I'm sure more is to follow suit. It looks like VR is kind of hitting its stride, and it actually may be exactly what we wanted. As for Valve making single-player games again, I think that's great. Because certainly, like, what did they do? Some card game, like a 3-lane card game that did not review all that well. And I think there was like a lot of issues with how it was monetized. And people were like, Valve, what are you doing? I think it's really smart to just kind of go back to something safe and secure like single player games. People are very interested still in single player games. They still sell well. My God, all my bodily functions lately. I'm strained voice. I'm burping. I'm stuttering. I'm stammering. I might be one of the most awkward podcast hosts of all time. But here you are, 56 minutes deep, listening to my ass anyway. I feel sorry for you. Anyway, great to see them working on single-player games again. I would love to see them pick up Left 4 Dead after playing World War Z, which is a fantastic game that's really filled the void for Left 4 Dead. I hope that Valve looks at that and goes, okay, so there's still people who dig that too. And I mean, Left 4 Dead in VR would be so cool. What do they call those guys? Those leapers or whatever that jump on your back? Imagine that happens in VR in a Left 4 Dead game. Oh my God. That'd be awesome. Last question of this topic comes from Brown Ninja 97. One of the interesting things about Half-Life Alyx for me isn't the game. It's that apparently a new source engine will arrive with it. Do you think it will be popular like its previous renditions, or are Unreal, Unity, and RPG Maker too far ahead? I really like this question because it's not something a lot of people think about when it comes to new engines hitting the playground. I think it will have an impact. I think it'll be kind of localized though. The reason I say that is because it's at the end of the day, a lot of it's about splits and familiarity. A lot of people are trained and know how to use Unreal, Unity, and RPG Maker. And I don't know what changes come in with a new source engine, how familiar it is if you worked with the original, but let's say familiarity is not an issue at all. Okay, there's a seamless transition between these two, and people are mostly familiar. If you work with Unreal, you work with Unity, and RPG Maker is pretty accessible too. I don't even know if that's like a serious game development tool. You can make actual cool games on there, but you have to have like some game dev knowledge. But I remember I used to make I put in quotes, games on there, like turn-taking RPGs when I was younger. I was really proud of some of those. That was some of the most fun I had as a kid. I loved doing that. Anyway, let's say there is that seamless transition. I think we have to also think of development splits. Unreal Engine offers a lot of money back if you use their engine. I think it's like a 85-15 or a 90-10 split. Not a lot of revenue is collected from you as a developer, so that means more money goes into your pocket when your game gets sold using that engine. And I think ultimately the more you can minimize splits, the better. And I don't think Valve has I don't know if their 70-30 still carries over into using their engine, but I think ultimately that those splits will tell the tale for those developers who are interested. And they may look at source and go like, whoa, you can do this, that, but gaming's a business too. So personally, at the end of the day, I think that it's really up to the talent in studio, and I think it's up to how much money they can make using said engine. All right, now it's on to section 4, the last part of the podcast. Now, for those of you who are patrons, you already know this, but for those who aren't aware, what I do is I'll collect all the topics and I'll post them in the podcast questions section inside our Discord. So if anyone wants to ask more topical questions to be included as we go along in the show, they can do so and make sure that that happens for both of us. And also, it's always great to have just tons of questions at my fingertips to interact with you guys throughout the show. That's a lot of what this show is about. But for those of you who are patrons, you already know I had Stadia as a topic, but then I decided to remove it last minute because I was like, you know what? This story could be summed up so easily. What's the discussion to have there? It's A, not a surprise. B, people aren't getting keys to access Stadia. And C, it's exactly what we thought it would be in the terms of the current infrastructure is not ready for the type of game streaming Google wants to do. And it just seems like a messy launch. The library was awful. There were games that came out years ago that were priced at $60. Just absolutely silly. So I was like, you know what? What's the point in having yet another discussion about Stadia, especially when I've seen every channel doing it? Not that every channel didn't do extensive Game Awards videos. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying I felt like that was just like that one topic that I go, what can you add to that conversation? So I thought, let's hop right into the patron questions. This has been a very interactive episode, and I wanted to continue with that theme. So we'll start off with Natural Calamity, who asks, with Age of Empires on the way soon to be released, what are some innovations you hope to see it'll change in the genre? I've never played Age of Empires, man, so I do apologize. This is where Karak comes in, right? This is why having multiple hosts is always great for your show, because while I may not have all the experience in the world, although I do try a lot of games, and I think I have a lot to offer, sometimes you got your other host who can just handle that part of the conversation while you kick your feet up and just listen in. We have looked into a third podcast host, so sometimes when one of us is missing, it doesn't have to be like a solo show or a two-man show. And we have some ideas. We'll see how it goes, and we'll keep you guys posted. Next question is, with the Obsidian game, by the way, this still comes from Natural Calamity, with the Obsidian game coming made by their team people, do you look at games made by a smaller team in a different light than games made by a massive team? Absolutely. It's a lot of what I talked about in a Patreon video, and I also mentioned it in my initial thoughts on Grounded, which was that pretty much if you are critiquing a game, right? Let's say you're looking at Grounded and you're reviewing it, and I'm not saying it's going to be amazing, but let's say you're playing it and you're like, it's awful because it should have had X, Y, and Z. And these things are development costs. Like, let's say people are saying we should be able to build cities, and in those cities we can spawn NPCs we want. We can kill them all and do what we want. We can assign them jobs, and we can also craft weapons, like 40 different systems that are like, this should have all been here. It's like, is the game the problem at that point, or is your knowledge of the team and the game you're reviewing the issue? Because you have to understand 13 people can do a lot, which we saw with Grounded, but only so much. So absolutely, you look at it in a different perspective. And the industry as a whole does. We just read categories from the Game Awards where we saw how they had independent games, which are much smaller teams, and we were celebrating that, whereas bigger games have publishers, and those publishers help provide funds to help develop the product. So it is usually a team effort, and so it's very important to highlight when it's a smaller team, an independent team, a massive team, and use that as context for your conversation. All right, let's keep it moving on. Aunt Jemima had another question. I got into the xCloud beta, and I've been using it a bit on my phone. Doesn't work great with my slow dorm Wi-Fi, unsurprisingly. I was wondering if either of you have tried xCloud and or Stadia, and what do you think these companies will do to get around the awful Wi-Fi/mobile data for the majority of those in the US? It's just one of those things that's time, man. It just takes time, right? I have not tried either of these. The xCloud looks really interesting, and I think it's a little more accessible, right? It's off your phone. And I would not be surprised if that was the first one we saw to get going. I think Google has the means, but I don't think Google will stick with it personally. So yeah, I have not tried it yet. I don't think dorm Wi-Fi is the best place to try it out, but then again, you also have to think of like data prices are ridiculous. Like, I listen to podcasts a lot in my car, and every month around the 25th, I always get a text from Verizon. Your data's almost up. You got 10% left. It's like, oh my God. All right. And that's podcast listening. An hour, 2-hour podcast. It's a decent amount of content I'm consuming, but that's just audio, right? Like, what happens when you're streaming video games to your phone? I don't know. I can't imagine that would help your data plan at all either. So that's why I'm not interested in game streaming in that manner as of now, because there's just so many question marks, and there's so much like, hold on, what about my phone plan? Like, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't factor in as much as I thought, but still, I care about game streaming in the sense of, okay, xCloud exists. If there's an xCloud app on the Nintendo Switch, can I now stream Game Pass titles on my Switch? Can I play KOTOR in bed? That's kind of that's where my head's at. That's where I care about xCloud. But I absolutely find it fascinating on the side of, can I play this big console game on my phone? I actually follow someone who used to work at Microsoft, went to Discord, Andy Lanique, excellent chef, awesome guy, love him to death. And he's posted videos of people playing Devil May Cry 5 on the xCloud at the Discord office, and it looks awesome. It's so cool to see that actually happening. In a sense, I think PlayStation was on top of it first with Gaikai. When they announced PlayStation 4, they announced Gaikai, and that turned into PlayStation Now, and the whole streaming idea of bringing those games to your consoles. So now you can play PS3 games on your PS4. Sadly, it's not like the Xbox where they found this way to get backwards compatibility working, but still, really cool. Molotov Michelle, number 1, favorite pre-battle speeches in video or gaming culture. So I didn't really have, when I saw this question, I couldn't think of like a battle speech. Because I think speeches sometimes, they're very motivational, but when I'm watching them in a game, I find them like a little tacked on, a little corny. I kind of like the tension, the unease of a big battle brewing. And I always think of Dragon Age Origins, where they're about to fight against the Darkspawn at Ostagar. Especially if you played the Battle of Ostagar or Return to Ostagar DLC for Dragon Age Origins. It kind of solidifies that impact. But I remember just the confidence the humans had against the Darkspawn, and they get just absolutely wiped out, and it was like a decimation, and hope was gone. And I like that pre-battle feeling, though, where you're like, oh man, things are really ramping up. Obviously, in video culture, we could say like 300 had like this is Sparta, the big build up, and you knew they were going in there fighting a losing battle. So that's one that comes to mind too. Really not unique pick on the video front, I imagine. The second question from Molotov Michelle says, one gaming platform to rule them all. Which platform would you have to take over all other platforms? All games migrated instantly and gets the whole damn pie, and obviously why? So I thought about this one, and I looked at PlayStation. I think they're just a little too fucking pretentious, I'll be honest. They just bug me. They make great exclusives, but the way they carry themselves as a business, I think they forget games are fun too. Like, you can have fun and have a business, and Sony just does not have fun. Nintendo has fun, but Nintendo's online infrastructure sucks ass. So I'm going to go with Microsoft, quite honestly. If the games are migrating over, give it to Microsoft, because they have great services. They have value in their services, but I'm sure the value would go away because then they'd have all the power. So, Molotov Michelle, you ask a very tough question with a lot of permutations when the transformation happens. All right. Mike Fury asks, do you think that Disco Elysium should have received more nominees for the Game Awards? No, actually, I think it received more than I ever expected, truth be told. Not that it didn't deserve as many, but I just didn't think that many people were talking about it. And I know a lot of people like it, but that's the thing. I think that supports, a lot of people are focusing on Control, but I think Disco Elysium didn't have a lot of press. And I mean, it's a smaller game, so it makes sense. And I think it still managed to find, a bit of success. It was trending pretty well on the Steam store, and I saw people talking about it, but it wasn't like, for example, The Outer Worlds, where that RPG hit, and that was like an RPG really dominating the conversation. So personally, I'm happy to see it in as many categories as it was in. We have another question from Great Ape 51, separate from the original question about the Game Awards. About Fallen Order, how do you feel about so many of the collectibles being cosmetic color swaps? Kind of killed my motivation besides the rare stim increase, health or force 1 out of 3 upgrade towards increasing those bars, or a few echo memories for decent XP gains. The characters played their parts well, but the story was pretty forgettable and a MacGuffin quest. Your take? When the game threw more than a handful of enemies at you, I kind of felt like the combat system broke down. I'd be locked onto one enemy, dodge away right as another enemy was in the attacking animation, or lock on targeting would move to the wrong enemy, making it easier to just break away, sprinting, and regrouping. Did you experience any of this, or do I just suck more than most? Played on Master Jedi, which is 3 out of 4 difficulty. Okay, so let's start off with the collectibles. I like that the collectibles are there. They do feel a little Yeah, like just color swaps. I thought at first they'd be a little more meaningful because one of the first ones I got turned BD1 into this R2D2 color scheme, and I was like, oh, they're gonna go like this route. Maybe I'll get like a C3PO version or something along those lines. I thought that'd be cool. They didn't, or BB8. They didn't take that route. It felt kind of just thrown in there. But then again, I thought the more significant collectibles outweighed them. Like you mentioned, the force or the health upgrades. The stims were awesome to find. There were 2 on Bogano I just got recently. And I also love the echo memories because they incorporate it into a cutscene where you pick up the guitar and you start talking to Seer, and then it sort of becomes a part of the gameplay. So it feels explained why he can pick up these items and feel their past through the force. I think that's really a great gameplay mechanic that helped build the lore in the universe. So I like that personally, and that kind of took that positive sort of overweighed the cosmetics. I would have loved for them to go crazy with a lot of different outfits, especially when people saw concept art for some other outfit that Cameron Monaghan, who played as the main character Cal Kestis in Jedi Fallen Order, had tweeted out. He was like, yo, this outfit's slick. And I was like, yeah, it absolutely is. Wish it was in the game. But I think someone who worked on Cal's outfit had actually tweeted out after that they worked so hard on getting the poncho working that like other outfits would have been hard to do. And quite honestly, I would rather the collectibles feel a little instead of like other parts of the game where I think they really nailed it. The characters played their parts well, but the story was pretty forgettable and a MacGuffin quest. Your take? So I'm gonna have to Google what is a MacGuffin. I've heard this before, but what? Hold on, you guys are gonna hear this live. What is a MacGuffin? Let's see here. An object or device in a movie or book that serves merely as a trigger for the plot. And then they use an example. The MacGuffin in this intriguing comedy is an unpublished novel by a young writer killed in the war. An object or device or event that is necessary to the plot and the motivation of the characters, but insignificant, unimportant, or irrelevant in itself. How do I talk about this without spoiling? I don't think I can really, because I get where you're coming from, and I think it depends on how. Because like there is we'll say a central object that you're chasing around in the story with BD1 and Seer and Grizz, I think his name is, and as you're going from planet to planet, you're discovering more aspects about the characters that surround you and how they tie together. And I think that sort of blends into the overall narrative. I don't know. I don't feel like I think MacGuffin would work if this central object you're chasing didn't have importance, but it does have importance because it leads to something I don't want to talk about. I can't say I agree. Your last question about Jedi Fallen Order was about the combat system, where the game threw more than a handful of enemies at you and you felt like it kind of broke down. And that you'd be locked onto an enemy, dodge right away, and another enemy would attack you. Yeah, there definitely was a mixture of sometimes too many enemies and sometimes enemies attacking at the wrong time. It wasn't like Batman, though, where it was so obviously paced where like you'd be surrounded by like 8 to 10 people who could just jump on Batman and kill him. But because it's a video game, they sort of gamify it where one guy throws his punch, you counter, then someone else throws his punch. But here's the difference is that if maybe Jedi Fallen Order had a counter button, it would probably be too easy. But then it would allow you to be attacked by 2 enemies at once, because then you could do what Batman does, like Y, right? If you double tap the Y, you would counter multiple people at once. And Batman got to the point where you could triple counter. So having tons of people attack you at once worked. But also Batman's evasion was great because you could just vault over someone and sort of reset the combat area without dropping a combo. But then again, these are 2 totally different combat systems. This one's more akin to Souls. I think it's because the animation, the attack styles, the force abilities sort of encourage a sense of aggression. And I personally played on 4 out of 4 difficulty, the Jedi Grandmaster. Or I think it was just called Grandmaster. And I'm about past the halfway point. It was really hard. The parry timing was tough. The enemies are far more aggressive. I think the aggression needs a little more balancing. I think it's a lot better when I knocked it down to your difficulty. I love the game even more now. I'm like, this is just right, because it's still tough enemies still hit hard, but they're not as aggressive. Because if you look at the aggression meter between those two difficulties, it's night and day. So I think they did a good job. But then again, I spent over half the game with, if you look at the parry timing, they give you like half a window to do that parry. And I was pretty good at it. So when I switched difficulties, I've been parrying like mad. I still have died. I've still had troubles, but it's still difficult, by the way, if you couldn't tell. But yeah, when the game throws a lot of enemies at you, I think it's because it's presented in a FromSoft experience. So you lock on and you start circling your target. And I never think first things first, like, oh, there's 8 people coming at me. Let me force push them all on their ass and then just charge at them and cut them down. Like, you can do that. And I think it's because those styles of games don't enable that level of power. So it feels a little weird. But on the other end, it is a little more thoughtful and maybe sometimes a not as obvious way. Like, there was a time I was leaving the Tomb of Macroll, and I was playing on the hardest difficulty at this point still. So you just got your force pull ability, and it's telling you that you can pull in these prone droids now. Or these probe droids? I don't know which one it is. I'll say probe droids. You can pull in these droids that are in the sky, and they're normally shooting at you, so they're, you have to either deflect lasers back at them, or now you can pull them in and melee them. But what you can also do is pull them in and then force push them at your enemies. So there's a point in this section where they send 4 scout troopers at you, and then a purge trooper with a staff and a Imperial Commando scout trooper. And on top of that, there's another droid that comes in. So you got to pull in the droid and shoot it at the purge trooper. And even though the purge trooper is really, really tough, especially on higher difficulties, you'll knock out all his health. So sometimes you got to use gimmicks like that. And I think the way the game's constructed, there's just been this years since like Demon's Souls, a mindset of locking on, circling your enemies, and sort of waiting and timing it out, when the game really gives you a lot of powers and abilities to fight back. And I just don't, even as someone who tries to abuse the systems as much as I can to get by, I sometimes didn't think of it, right? I sometimes didn't think of it. So it could be a mix of that. That's not to say the combat system's perfect. I do think at times enemies attack too many times at once. You'll have 2 enemies swinging at you constantly in a melee range, and then you'll be blocking bolts. And if you try to dodge or sidestep, you're going to get shot. But if you're just doing a full-on roll, you'll get hit with, I'm sorry, if I switch that around. If you do a full-on roll, you're going to end up getting shot because you're still in that rolling animation, and you'll dodge the melee. But if you sidestep, you'll avoid the bullets, but then you'll get hit by a melee attack, and eventually your posture will break. So it forces you to dodge or sprint away and reset, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world, but it definitely doesn't feel good, right? It's not a good feeling when the game delivers on such a power fantasy. So hopefully my thoughts helped you a little bit. The last set of questions are kind of serious. So let's start off with RGenie869. I'll find a question in this somewhere, but for now I'll start with it as me venting to you guys. I've been working more and more over the last few months, and now I find myself working 3 jobs and over 12 hours a day, half the week. It hit me that the other day I'm missing out on family time, and although I can give reasons to why I need to work as much as I do, it just isn't worth it if I don't get to spend time with my girlfriend and stepdaughter. Anyway, I guess my question could be, what would you guys do in my shoes? I need bills, and with the holidays right around the corner, I need money for gifts and travel for family and such. Yeah, so that's a tough spot to be in for sure, because like you want to work and make your money, but at the same time you want to, money isn't life. Like if there's one thing I've learned in my short amount of time on this planet in the scheme of things, I was about to say all my years, but I'm 24. If there's one thing I've learned very quickly, it's that stressing over money and finances is probably the worst thing you can do ever. Not to say that it can't stress you, but if you can just live semi-comfortably, you have enough money to get by on bills and gradually save up for fun leisure stuff, then that's all that matters. And look, like this is coming from someone who pays their bills. I pay for rent at a studio space now. I had to drop martial arts. I stopped studying Japanese because I would have needed an online tutor. So like a lot of these extra expenses that were fun for me, I had to drop because of that. And I understand working hard, especially around this time of the year, man. Last Saturday, I had my first day off in like a month. And I know people have gone longer than that. But I mean, I'm talking every day in and out for a month. I continued to work. on something, whether it was just the podcast, whether it was something quick on the Patreon, or a Patreon video, or long recording sessions, redoing videos. Like there was that one day where I uploaded a video about EA versus Bethesda, and then the audio came out horrible, but I thought maybe I fixed it and I wanted to see what the audience said, and then I had to redo the whole video, and sometimes you're your own worst enemy in that way. But especially for this time of the year, it's time for me to grind and like get stuff done, because I work on a ton of videos in the meantime. So then when I go away around the 20th, I have a lot of time off. And I know everyone's situation is different, but I totally resonate with the idea of like busting your butt with long days where you're just fried and you're not seeing the people you want to see, and sometimes even doing the things you want to do. I used to see my girlfriend multiple times a week. And I mean, also we're deep in our relationship where I think this would have naturally happened anyway, but I see her once every week, probably every 2 weeks sometimes. If it wasn't for our podcast, we're both so busy, it would be really tough to get together. So I understand that. I hope that, your stepdaughter and your girlfriend do understand the sacrifices you're making. I don't know your situation at home where, my girlfriend and I always talk about when we're moving into a place together, it's going to be like a team effort. It's not like, how traditionally I think was like way back in like the 50s and stuff, where it was like man goes to work, wife stays at home. Like it's a team effort nowadays. Like pool your resources, right? And so I don't know if your girlfriend's working as well. I'm not saying anything bad about her if she's not. I don't know her situation either. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think if you guys put the money together, maybe it can alleviate some of your hours, right? Maybe you can drop a job. Because I have a friend who worked 2 jobs and was about to hop into a third one, and we kind of talked him out of it because you just would overwork yourself. And that's why I tell people, like, try not to stress the dollar bill as much, because what happens is you just work yourself into the grave. It's like you're not taking that money with you, bro. It's good to have money, right? Like it's a good feeling when you make some good money. I'm not going to deny that. And it's great to spend it on something nice and reward yourself. But is it worth your life, your happiness, the time you're spending with people, what you'll really carry with you? I don't think so. So Jeannie, I hope I helped you out. I hope you're doing well or better by the time you hear this. And I hope maybe some of my thoughts help sort things out. If I were in your shoes, I'd try to organize maybe a little less time working. Because certainly, think of this way, man. Let me just tack this on. There's stuff like Black Friday, there's Cyber Monday, there's huge deals on Amazon. You can create your own gifts. Like there are budgetary ways to give great, meaningful gifts that people will use. One of the best gifts I ever gave my dad was a pair of headphones that was like $25 at, I think, Walmart, that connect to the TV, because at night he'll turn up the TV, and my mom's bedroom, their bedroom rather, is like on the other side of that wall, so she'd always be like, the TV's loud, turn it down. So for $25, and he's been using it, and they just broke this year after like, I think 5 years, and that $25, man. So, and everyone's financial situation is different, but that's a very cheap gift that lasted that long, and we still, actually, when they broke, we were just talking about how that was such a great gift. So you can give meaningful gifts at a price that won't break the bank. I get that, because as someone who loves Christmas, loves the holidays, you want to give these banger gifts. You want to drain the bank account, because it's just amazing seeing the reaction on people's faces. But just know you can do that and be cost efficient. Yeah, it's very possible. Don't let the dollar sign determine the value of your gift, because that's not what a gift's about. Okay, now I hope I've helped you. So let's talk to Ben Jam. What are a few moments in your life that you have felt the lowest of lows and also the highest peaks of happiness? Oof. Well, we're cutting deep in this second half of the show. What's happening? All right. So, lowest of lows. My definitive lowest of lows was the end of 2017. I struggled really, really bad with anxiety and depression. I was just not in like an ideal situation. I do struggle a little bit with seasonal depression around this time of the year, but I think it was a vitamin D deficiency, because I started taking vitamin D supplements, and my mood this time and around this year is usually really low, and I've been good. I've been actually great. Not like I'm super peppy and happy every day, but like I've had a fucking hard ass year. This has not been a good year. A year that certainly would have beat me down any other year. But I think I'm a little more trained. I've gone to therapy before and stuff, so I know how to cope with problems, handle problems. But also I think I've learned a lot about my body in the meantime. But yeah, 2017 was like lowest of lows, and like I was like stuck in like a frozen anxious state constantly. I shared this as well during a video that like I had this kind of thing, which sounds scary at first, but like it was called like suicidal OCD. And what it pretty much was, I talked about it with my therapist, was pretty much what happens is I get anxious or I get depressed, and I'm like, I don't want to, you'd see people around you who were like anxious or depressed and they commit suicide, and you're like, I don't want to ever do that. Like that's sad. It's horrible. I don't want to hurt anyone like that. I don't want to hurt myself like that. I want to get through this, but you get scared that like, do you like lose control of yourself because you're anxious or depressed? And it turns out there was actually a condition, and I got my head on straight. I realized like I'm in control of myself. I'm in control of my actions. I'm in control of my emotions in most regards. And so that peak of happiness was when I got over that hump, which was last year, right? Like last year in about June. I remember coming home with my girlfriend. I went to sleep that night and I said, I'm sorry. I had actually talked about with my therapist. I did some additional research, and I remember going to bed that night saying to myself, I get it now. Like, I get it now. I understand my problem now. And like from that day I woke up onwards, like my life had changed, and I felt like this tunnel vision had cleared out, and I like being normal was great. Like that's the thing with anxiety and depression. Like you feel like you just want to be normal. I don't know how to describe it in any other way. Like normalcy is something you would kill to have, and to finally have it back, it's been great. This year has been tough. I mentioned on my social media, my grandma's health really declined. We have a new puppy, which has been amazing. He has been such a bright spot, but starting off, he was a lot of work. He requires a lot of attention and insane scheduling. So between that and helping out my grandmother, who lives around the corner from us, it's been really hard to find any shred of free time. It's been really, really hard. So this has been a tough year for me. But the difference is you don't define it by this is the lowest of lows or the highest of highs. You have obviously high moments, but you don't let the lows defeat you, right? So like this is a tough year, but my channel has been reinvigorated. I have the best partner in the world in my girlfriend. I love my family. I feel like I actually have a valued opinion on my platform now. Like I can pick other topics and have an impact. If you couldn't tell, my work means a lot to me. I have a puppy named after Revan, which is incredible. He's such a good dog, and we still have Duke, who's another amazing dog. And so Revan will be my dog whenever I move out. And, I look at him and sometimes I tear up a little bit because I'm like, he's going to see so much of my life. Like I'm 24 now, and he's going to see like so many major points, like hopefully marriage and traveling the world. Like one day I'll visit Japan. He'll come with me. Like it gets me so happy thinking of that stuff. So I don't view life in lowest of lows or highest of highs as much anymore. Like obviously I go highest of highs, Fallout 4 announcement period. My channel is blowing up, dream come true. Skyrim's rares. Like when I first started covering that, like those are high highs for me. Like, wow, I'm chasing after what I've always wanted. But I view it as like peppered out experiences, and there have been some really damn good ones. And I don't ignore it. I don't sit in denial, but I don't focus on the lows as much. I used to always be like, 2017 sucks. 2017 sucks. Like sometimes I wouldn't even wear, where is it behind me somewhere? Flannels. I wouldn't wear flannels because I used to wear them a lot in 2017, and that's when I was really depressed and anxious, and it reminded me of that. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, it's a fucking flannel. Come on, wake up, Matt. Like, it's a flannel. Who cares? And now I just wear them all the time because it's like, it's an object. It has no connection to my past. It's just a thing at the end of the day, and it's a comfy-ass thing. It's a gift from my grandmother, nonetheless, so you can't let the past pollute your current state. All right. Thank you for the thoughtful questions. We still have another one, but this one's about music. It comes from Paul, a.k.a. Dimples. What kind of music do you guys like? If I had to guess, I'd say Matt listens to some sort of electronic and early 2000s music. Karak, you strike me as the kind of fella who blasts Led Zeppelin from the top of your sled, pulled by bears with mounted machine guns. In all seriousness, though, what tickles your musical fancy? I like how Karak's got machine guns on a sled, and I'm just jamming out to like Britney fucking Spears. That's sick. Okay. You're not wrong. I do enjoy the occasional electronic music. I like I call it chill step. Actually, I think that's what it's called, which is just like a subtle beat with like low vocals that sits in the background. It's nice to have running so I can just focus and work, but have like not dead sound in my bedroom. Dead sound's the worst as a YouTuber when you're just like sitting in your room and you can just hear like a pin drop and it's like, you can feel a little lonely at times. I don't know. I like my solitude, so I don't really get too upset with being alone, but I also get a lot of social time too. So that solitude's nice for me. But, you know, like, for example, when I'm at the studio, I'm still furnishing it out. So there's still like an echo. It's still quiet. Sometimes all I hear is like the heat running. And that feeling it's just like awkward. So yeah, music, turning that on, chill steps a go-to. But more frequently, pretty much any time, is 50s music. So you got me all wrong. Early 2000s. I listen to any genre except country. I'm sorry, I hate country music. But 50s music is my go-to. I love 50s music. God, still can't talk, and we're almost done with the show. But yeah, man, I love it. It's just a good vibe type of music. It's clean. I feel it's healthy. It's just nice to listen to. Like, gets me peppy. It doesn't pump me up. Like, if I was to work out, for example, I'm not going to listen to 50s music, okay? So don't get me wrong there. But, you know, it's all situational, right? But I'm not as experienced with music. I'm actually going to be going to my first concert next year. And I'm not like a concert guy. I don't really have like huge social anxiety, but I get nervous in sometimes big crowds, but I'm trying to, you know, conquer that fear. And that'll be one of my first tests. Like, I'm usually good in gaming conventions and stuff. That doesn't bother me. But like when it comes to music stuff, I don't know why. Something about like sitting in the crowd, like at least at a gaming convention, I walk through the crowd. I'm going somewhere. I have an objective. When I'm just like standing there listening to music, I don't know. Because I did go to one as like a younger kid, and like it was fun. It was me and my dad. But I don't know. I didn't just like jam out with it as much. Okay. Let's see what else we've got here. Brown Ninja has 2 final questions, and then the show's a wrap. So first one is, assuming Google can magically fix their lag issues to the point where you can't notice it, if you were Google or Mr. Google Plays or Angry Google Gamer, what changes would you make to gather a following? See, that's the thing, man. It's like, number one, you need exclusive studios, like studios who are going to buy into your program and make exclusive games. Bring people in because ultimately they want to play games. We can already play games, and most of us are capable of taking breaks from games and leaving our houses. We don't need to carry a fucking controller or a portable system with us. We'll come back to our games. So make exclusive games. That would be my change. Number 5 from him. Sorry for lots of questions today. My final question is, let's say games suddenly doubled in price, literally every game/subscription, and for whatever reason, we gamers just dealt with it and still bought games as we would. How would you think the games would change with such a vastly different increase in revenue? Well, here's the thing, Brown Ninja. I disagree that there would even be an increase at all, because here's the thing. You may be selling for a higher price. Like, I could make Mr. Matty Plays shirts, right? And I could sell one person a $50 overpriced t-shirt, or I could sell to 10 people a $10 t-shirt. And because of that, I'm making more because it's at a fair price and more people have expendable income like that as in a $10 purchase. So I think if gaming goes into that, let's say $90 is now the new mainstay. You spend $90 your example was double the game price. So you're spending in the US $120. And I think anyone who's in Canada or Australia is officially quitting games at that point, because I think they're already spending like $90. Oh my God. So that would be awful. So let's say I'm spending $120 on a game. Number one, my selections would be a lot more. They're already limited as is, right? Like, I don't crap money, so I don't spend it on every game under the sun. And I'm fortunate enough to be in a position with my channel where sometimes I do get free game codes. Even if I don't get the review copy, I'll get a free code and I'll be able to play the game and make content about it. And so that's been nice. But even then, I still make very like precarious decisions on did I use that word right? I'll use a different word. I make very specific decisions on what games that I would want to buy and play. Because at the end of the day, I'm still a consumer. I'm still consuming a product, and I want to fuel bad practices, and I want to make impulsive purchases. I can't stand when I hear a gaming podcast and I hear these fucking hosts go, I still got this game in the package seal. Have you ever looked in the mirror and just been like, fuck, man, I'm just buying games for no fucking reason. I'm just blowing money. And like, I think of it this way, man, like, people donate money to me to have a salary. Like, I don't mindlessly waste other people's generosity. I just can't just make stupid purchases. And at the end of the day, do I work for my money? Absolutely. And but it's because of your support. I can't just openly spend money in a stupid fashion like that. I can't. I mean, funny enough, my girlfriend and I just talked about on BFGF AFK how I just suck at spending money for the most part. Like, I'm not cheap. I will spend money, but like, I'm very controlled with my wallet. And I think that's a big reason why, because like I get patron donations. It's like, you know, you guys didn't donate to me for me to go out and buy a game and have it just sit in the seal on my shelf because like I just felt like spending money that day. Like, fuck that. But anyway, what I was getting at is, let's say the game prices do double. Less people are probably going to buy them, and I don't think you'll see a change in revenue. It might even stay the same or decrease, in fact, unless people accepted it. And if they did continue to buy it as is, where we see, for example, Pokemon selling 6 million copies, 7 million copies in its opening weekend. At that price, you'd expect bigger, better games and more powerful hardware, and further advancing our industry. Or we would stay pat and we would just see things continue on as is because they're making a lot more money now. It's all about that money. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that'll conclude episode 229 of the H.A.M Radio Podcast. I have never done a solo episode this long. I think we sat at 40, 50 minutes for the last two we did. But those were kind of like questions sourced through Twitter and whatnot. And we tried to do a bed podcast that one time. That was interesting. I think that was for the Outer Worlds. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in, for being really active in the Patreon this week. Send your well wishes to Karak, who has a migraine. Give him some love. If you got this far in the episode, you want to engage with me and still Karak, please do tag him. Let him know that we have not forgot about him, even though he's not here for an episode. Use the hashtag Getting Better. Not only for Karak, but also I felt those last few questions sort of hit home about how, you know, some people have their own struggles. And I thank you guys for being such a transparent audience. I'm glad that you're comfortable enough to share your stories here. I'm glad that you entrust me with your stories here, that you think of us when you want some advice or a guiding hand or wisdom. I think wisdom's a little egotistical to say, but I'm just honored that you view us in that manner because we value you so much here. We care about you. You guys keep this show going, literally. You know, with what would the show be without I can't believe we ran the show for so long, rather, without patron questions and that level of interaction. Like, it's so much better now. And in a way, it's kind of sad because we sort of hit our peak with this show around 2016, where we were getting 40, 50,000 listeners a week. And we sort of dwindled down because we went through restructuring, rebranding, bringing in new hosts. And not that Karak's worse. Karak's, I'd say, the best host we've ever had on this show. But it's just it's a lot of change for a show, and eventually people get tired of adjusting. So to those of you who stick with us and interact on this level and think of us, just know that we are always incredibly appreciative of you. And that'll conclude this episode. So if you want more podcasts, the Patreon's where you can go, or you can listen for free on Spotify, iTunes, Google. I say iTunes, but I always forget iTunes does not exist. I'm sorry, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Just type in Mr. Matty Plays. You'll find either BFGF AFK, or if you want to listen to episodes of this in the catalog, we have you covered there. And now, with all of that out of the way, I'll talk with you guys next week. I'm hoping Karak will be back. If not, hope you like another hour of me. All right. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.